We have all been there, staring at a text message that just says, haha true at 11:42 p.m., trying to decode the punctuation, replaying a 3-second hallway interaction until the memory loses all meaning. It is an exhausting experience. All of this rumination consumes your cognitive budget. Every hour spent replaying a conversation is an hour of mental bandwidth you cannot use for work, sleep, or actual progress. The dilemma is that separating a naturally warm, charismatic personality from genuine romantic interest is nearly impossible on the surface. Some people are simply polite and engaging by default. This chart maps time spent analyzing against actionable clarity achieved. Dissecting casual conversations traps you in the bottom right corner, the analysis paralysis zone. You exert maximum effort, but gain zero clarity. Remaining here trades mental bandwidth for the fragile safety of avoiding rejection.
Claim that mental real estate, you have to abandon the guessing game entirely. By applying a strict 3-step behavioral framework, you can cut through the noise and force a definitive outcome. The first mistake most guys make is evaluating a smile, a laugh, or a friendly gesture in an isolated vacuum. Relying strictly on how warmly she acts toward you leads to a high rate of false positives. She might laugh at your jokes or ask about your day simply because she is a highly social, friendly person. The trade-off of misreading that friendliness is steep. Misinterpreting basic customer service or general human decency for romantic interest risks creating deep social or workplace embarrassment. To protect yourself from those false positives, you must recalibrate. You have to apply the contrast rule. You start by establishing her baseline. That requires passively observing her everyday interactions with her coworkers, the service staff, and her platonic friends. You are watching for her default level of enthusiasm and warmth. A lingering conversation or a bright smile only becomes valuable data if it represents a clear, observable behavioral deviation from that established baseline. If she treats you with the exact same energy she gives everyone else, it is just noise. So what does a genuine behavioral deviation look like in real time? It usually appears as a specific shift in how she allocates her attention. Watch for the subtle indicators. Her default energy might soften when she turns to you. You might notice a slight increase in nervousness, or she may suddenly hyper-focus on you in a crowded room compared to how she engages with others. Pay attention to her memory of micro-details. If you mention an obscure band in passing, and 3 weeks later she sends you an article about them, that level of retention requires focused, non-platonic attention. Physical barriers naturally melt when platonic rules are bypassed. She might find excuses to be near you or playfully nudge your shoulder. Gathering this contrast data comes with a strict requirement: extreme patience. You have to sit back and observe passively, and that process cannot be rushed. Once you identify a clear, consistent behavioral deviation, passive observation has served its purpose. It is time to end the observing phase and begin low-stakes testing to verify your hypothesis. If you are risk-averse, you need a safe mechanism to gauge the waters before risking a friendship or workplace dynamic. That is the exact purpose of low-stakes testing. You can start with the we test. In the middle of a natural conversation about a new coffee shop or a movie, casually seed a future low-pressure plan.
Simply say, "We should go check that out sometime," and watch her reaction. This decision tree maps out the 2 branching paths her response will likely take. Enthusiastic agreement validates the green light. If she immediately says, "Yes, let's do it next week," she is proving a willingness to commit future unstructured time to you. If she gives a vague, non-committal, "Yeah, totally," followed by an immediate subject change, that is a yellow flag requiring you to pull back. The inherent trade-off of verbal testing is that words can be a polite defense mechanism. You may receive an ambiguous maybe, which leaves you with incomplete data and still requires a judgment call. While the we test provides excellent directional data, verbal tests can occasionally be deflected. To confirm underlying tension, a physical test is required. To push through polite ambiguity, you introduce a nonverbal testing mechanism, the eye contact hold. The execution requires precision. Right after a shared laugh fades, hold her gaze for exactly 1 to 2 seconds longer than is socially normal. This specific action forces vulnerability. It tests for mutual physical tension without requiring either of you to speak. You must weigh the high-risk trade-off of this specific test. If the romantic feeling is unreciprocated, holding that gaze carries a strong probability of creating momentary micro-awkwardness. But that tension effectively shatters the polite facade. If she holds the gaze back without darting her eyes away in discomfort, the platonic baseline has definitively been broken. Observation and low-stakes tests are highly effective tools to mitigate risk, but they cannot replace final, definitive action. To finish this process, you must move to the final, non-negotiable step in the framework, the definitive ask. This flowchart breaks down the exact formula for a successful, undodgeable ask: time plus a specific activity plus clear intent. You say, "I'd love to take you out for coffee this Friday." Notice how both branches converge to the exact same outcome. Executing this specific linguistic formula strips away all ambiguity. Whether she says yes or tells you she is busy without offering an alternative date, you get absolute, unarguable clarity regarding her interest level. The harsh trade-off required for this outcome is that you must permanently surrender the comfortable safety of guessing. You have to accept the very real possibility of blunt rejection. Think of this surrender as a mandatory transaction. You are paying with a moment of discomfort to purchase back your future focus. If you are an anxious overthinker, a definitive no is a successful outcome. It immediately refunds the mental real estate you have been wasting trying to read signals that weren't there. If you are risk-averse, recognize that faithfully following this framework, establishing the baseline, running the tests, and framing the ask, systematically removes 90% of the social risk before the final question is ever popped. You are looking at two potential futures today: the exhausting anxiety of a 6-month guessing game versus the brief, manageable sting of a one-day rejection. The math of your own time favors the blunt truth. Rejection costs you one uncomfortable afternoon, while ambiguity costs you months of background anxiety. Look at your current situation, apply the contrast rule tomorrow, run the tests, and decide that it is finally time to force clarity.